I heard the plastic bag hit the table before I even looked up. The sound was sharp, careless, as if the weight inside belonged to me. My younger brother stood in the doorway of my apartment, arms crossed, eyes already judging the silence of my living room. "You'll sort out the bill, right?" he asked, not a hint of doubt in his voice. He didn't even say hello. My throat tightened. I was still in my work clothes, chalk dust lingering on my sleeves from the lesson I'd taught 2 hours earlier. I had barely sat down, barely breathed. Yet here he was, acting as if my paycheck belonged to him, to all of them. When I didn't answer fast enough, he let out a small scoff. "You're acting different lately." Different. That word hit something raw beneath my ribs. I pushed the grocery bag back toward him. The motion was small, but it felt like lifting a boulder. "I'm not paying for this." His face tightened. "What's wrong with you these days?" Outside, a car honked. A child laughed. Life moved normally, but inside my tiny apartment, the air thickened like wet cloth. My heart beat too loudly, because this was the first time I had ever said no, and it already felt like a betrayal everyone had been waiting to accuse me of. His eyes narrowed, a cruel line forming at the corner of his mouth. "So you've decided you're better than us now." My breath wavered, but I didn't take the words back. The ceiling fan spun in a slow, uneven circle above me, its blade slicing through the dusty afternoon light. I watched it for a moment, long enough to feel the wobble in its rhythm, long enough to admit that I felt the same way. Tilted, tired. One bad push away from falling apart. My mom's voice buzzed through the phone on the table, vibrating against the wood as if it were warning me. "Pick up," my brother muttered, leaning back with that expectant stare that made my skin tighten. I didn't. I already knew what she would say. He sighed loudly, the dramatic kind meant to remind me of my duties. "She's crying, you know. You made her cry over groceries. Who does that to their own mother?" My stomach twisted, because I knew it wasn't the groceries. It was the rebellion, the first crack in the system they had built around me. "I said I'll help with needs," I whispered, though my voice barely reached him. He smirked. "Since when do you decide what's a need? You were fine helping before. Therapy, travel, an apartment? Since when do those matter more than family?" The words were soft, but they hit like thrown stones. I looked at the fan again, watched its shadow blink across the ceiling, because for the first time I wondered if they even saw me as a person, or just a moving wallet with a pulse. My brother leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Just remember, no one likes a selfish woman." Something inside me turned cold. "Open the door." My aunt's voice cut through the hallway before I even reached it. Sharp, urgent, carrying the weight of every obligation she believed I owed her. I hesitated with my hand on the knob, just a breath, just long enough to brace myself for the storm on the other side. When I finally opened it, she pushed past me without waiting for an invitation, her handbag brushing my arm like a warning strike. "You've lost your mind," she said before the door even clicked shut. There was no hello, no how are you, just accusation. She paced across my small living room, her gold bangles clinking with every step, tiny metallic blows landing in the center of my chest. "I heard what you told your mother, that you're only paying for needs." Needs? Who raised you? Who fed you? Who made sure you had a life better than ours? I swallowed. I didn't say I'd stop helping. I said I need boundaries. She stopped pacing. Her eyes scanned me from hair to shoes, slow and cold. "There it is," she murmured. "Whitewashed, just like they said." My throat tightened. "I'm just tired," I said. "I've been drowning for years." She waved a dismissive hand, almost hitting the picture frame on my shelf. "Everyone is tired. You think we don't struggle? But we don't abandon family. Not like this." Abandon. The word hit harder than anything my brother had said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You chose yourself. Remember that when you have no one left." The cruelty in her tone cracked something small but important inside me. A chair scraped across the tiled floor behind me, loud enough to slice through my nerves. I turned and saw my cousin sliding into the seat across from me at my mother's dining table, a smirk already forming before he spoke. "So," he said, resting his elbows on the table, "you really told everyone you're done paying? Just like that?" My mother sat beside him, eyes red, fingers twisting the corner of her apron. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was already a verdict. I stayed standing. Somehow sitting felt like surrender. "I didn't say done," I replied softly. "I said I can't carry everything anymore." My cousin laughed, a short mocking burst that made the couple at the far end of the room glance over. "I knew that job would change you. Look at you now, thinking you're special because you teach a few kids." Heat crawled up my neck. It wasn't the words, it was the way he looked at me, like I was something small, something laughable. He lifted his phone and angled it toward me. "Family group chat is blowing up. Want to see what they're saying?" I didn't move. He took that as permission. Selfish. Ungrateful. Too proud now. "Oh, this one's good." He read it with a dramatic voice. "She forgets who paid her school fees." The room tilted slightly. I hadn't asked anyone to pay for anything. I had worked. I had earned scholarships. But truth didn't matter here, just the performance. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You embarrassed your mom. That's what everyone knows. You made her cry. And for what? An apartment you don't even own yet?" My mother finally whispered, "Why would you shame me like this?" The words hit harder than any insult in the room, and everyone watched me, waiting to see if I would break. My knees weakened before I even reached the gate. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, just a slow, steady loosening, like my body finally admitted what my mind had been pretending not to feel. I grabbed the metal railing, the cool surface grounding me as the afternoon sun pressed against my back. Behind me, footsteps approached, quick, irritated. "Wait!" It was my older sister. She rarely visited anyone, yet here she was, walking toward me like she had been rehearsing every word. Her expression carried that same tightness everyone in the family seemed to share lately, an anger that felt inherited. "You're causing chaos," she said, stopping just a few feet away. Her tone wasn't loud, but it cut deeper because of how calm it was. I exhaled shakily. I needed to breathe. I needed space. She folded her arms. "Space? From family? You sound like those people online, the ones who think independence makes them enlightened." I looked down at my hands gripping the railing, the tremor in my fingers betraying me. "You know I've been helping for years," I whispered. "That was your role," she replied plainly. "You were blessed with a job that pays decently. The rest of us weren't." A strange silence settled between us, heavy, unbalanced. She stepped closer, her voice tightening. "Mom said you told her you're saving for therapy." "Therapy? For what? You think you're the only one hurting in this family?" Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because she believed them. "I'm tired," I finally said. "And we're not?" she shot back. A cruel edge slipped into her voice. "You're abandoning us because you want to live soft like the people you teach. You're not one of them." The railing pressed into my palm, because for the first time I realized they didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me to stay where they needed me. The community hall buzzed with voices when I walked in, a low, restless noise rolling between the plastic chairs and faded posters on the walls. I hadn't planned to attend the Sunday meeting, but avoiding everyone was starting to feel like giving them the victory they were already celebrating, so I showed up, quiet, steady, braced. The moment I stepped through the doorway, conversations slowed, not stopped. Just slowed enough for me to feel every gaze land on my skin like tiny sparks. My aunt was the first to speak. "So you're finally here," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one interfered. I nodded at her, then took a seat at the edge of a long table. My brother leaned back in his chair, tapping his finger impatiently against the surface. "Maybe now we can talk about the contribution for the wedding," he said. A ripple of murmurs followed. My chest tightened. "I already said I can't keep paying for everything." My cousin rolled his eyes. "Look at her. She thinks she's too good for cultural duty." Another voice chimed in from the far side of the room. People who forget their roots always end up alone. Heat rose behind my ears, but I stayed in my seat. Then my mother stood. She didn't look angry. She looked wounded. "My daughter says she will help only with needs," she said softly, though the tremor in her voice carried across the hall. "She says her life must come first now." Someone near the window scoffed. What kind of daughter says that? A flush of humiliation crawled across my neck, settling heavy across my shoulders. But then, something unexpected happened. An elderly neighbor, a woman I barely knew, lifted her hand. "What if," she said gently, "she simply wants a chance to breathe?" The room went quiet, just enough for the truth to pulse beneath my ribs. For the first time in weeks, someone had spoken in my defense, and that changed everything. A single paper cup sat crushed near the front of the hall, its edges bent inward as if someone had squeezed it in frustration. That small, discarded shape caught my eye because it mirrored exactly how my chest felt. Compressed, misshaped, one breath away from collapsing. My brother kicked it aside as he stood. "Let's stop pretending," he said. "She just doesn't want to help anymore. She thinks she's too important now." My mother didn't correct him. She simply lowered her gaze, and that silence sliced deeper than any accusation. I forced my hands to stay still on the table. "I've been helping since I was 19, I said quietly. "I've paid bills none of you even knew about." My cousin snorted. "Sounds like she wants applause." But the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Benton, spoke again. "She didn't say that. She said she's tired." My aunt turned sharply toward her. "Tired of what? Living better than the rest of us?" Something flickered in Mrs. Benton's expression, something old and understanding. "Sometimes," she said, "people who carry the most are the ones least allowed to rest." The room shifted, just slightly, enough to make my brother's jaw tighten. Then, another voice spoke, a young woman near the back. "She helped pay my sister's school books last year," she said. "Most of you didn't know that." Heads turned, murmurs rippled. My breath caught, because finally, parts of the truth were leaking into the light. But the tension didn't ease. If anything, it sharpened. Families never let go of old expectations quietly. And I felt the next strike coming. My cousin dragged a chair closer, the legs scraping against the floor in a long, irritated streak. The sound cut through the hushed murmurs and pulled every gaze back toward me again. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes sharp with something between anger and triumph. "Fine," he said. "If you're so tired, show us the numbers. Show us where all this money you claim to spend has gone." A few people nodded. Someone whispered, "Yes, let her prove it." My pulse stumbled, not because I couldn't prove it, because I knew exactly what this was. A power move, a way to turn my exhaustion into guilt, my boundaries into accusations. "I don't owe you my bank statements," I said firmly. He smirked. There it is, the attitude. My mother lifted her head then, wiping quickly at the corner of her eye. "You used to help without questions," she whispered. "Without this." The hurt in her voice cracked something deep, but before I could respond, Mrs. Benton stepped in again. "Enough," she said quietly. "You're not asking for help. You're demanding it." My aunt snapped her head around. "We're family. That's how family works." Mrs. Benton shook her head. "No, that's how dependence works." The room stiffened. an unexpected whiplash, sharp enough to jolt even me. My brother pointed a finger at me. If she walks out now, she's choosing strangers over blood. A hush fell. Every eye shifted to me, and in that breath, I realized something terrifying and true. They weren't asking for help. They were asking for ownership. A faint tremor ran through my fingers before I noticed it. Small, almost invisible, but enough to make me clasp my hands together under the table so no one would see. The hall felt too warm, the air heavy, each breath pushing against something tight in my chest. My aunt leaned back with a satisfied sigh, as if the entire room had reached the verdict she wanted. She won't show anything, because she knows she's been spending on herself while we struggle. My jaw clenched. I've been living paycheck to paycheck for years, I said softly. My brother scoffed. And whose fault is that? You act like you're the only one with responsibilities. I raised my eyes to him. You bought a new phone last month, a new sound system the month before. I paid the electric bill that same week. A few heads turned his way. His face tightened. Then he smirked as if it didn't matter. You're bringing up old things now? Mrs. Breeze. Pete Benton let out a slow breath. She's not bringing up old things. She's bringing up patterns. The word hung in the air like a quiet accusation no one wanted to touch. My mother whispered, "If you keep talking like this, they'll think I raised you poorly." Something inside me pulled, sharp, like fabric tearing. "I'm not shaming you," I said. "I'm trying to survive." A young man near the doorway muttered, "People like her forget their place once they taste a little success." For a moment, the room blurred at the edges, not because of the words, but because I realized how many of them had been waiting to say this. A loose curtain swayed near the open window, its slow movement letting thin stripes of light shift across the floor. The motion was subtle, but it drew my eyes because everything inside the hall felt rigid, unmoving, except that one soft piece of fabric. My brother rose from his seat, pushing it back with a dull thud. "So tell us," he said, folding his arms, "what's really going on with you?" The question wasn't concern. It was accusation dressed in curiosity. "I'm trying to build a future," I said. "For myself. For once." My cousin tilted his head. "You already have a future. It's called family. Or did you forget that too?" A few people murmured in agreement. My throat tightened. "I've missed chances because I kept giving. I've delayed plans. I've used my savings on everyone but me." My aunt scoffed loudly enough for the entire room. "You say that like we forced you." The words hit harder than she knew. A middle-aged man near the back added, "People who complain about helping usually never wanted to help in the first place." A sting spread across my chest. They weren't even hiding it anymore. The entitlement, the resentment. They had been waiting for this moment, to call me selfish without ever admitting what they had taken. Mrs. Benton glanced at me with quiet worry, as if she could see how close I was to unraveling. My mother whispered, "If you loved us, you wouldn't talk like this." The sentence slipped under my ribs like a blade, slow, deliberate. Because love was exactly what I had been giving them, and it had never been enough. The lights flickered once above us, a brief dimming that washed the hall in a shadowed hush. It lasted barely a heartbeat, but it was enough to pull everyone's attention upward, enough to make the room feel smaller, closer, harder to breathe in. When the light steadied, all eyes returned to me. My cousin leaned back with a slow, mocking smile. "Look at her face. She's breaking already." I held my breath, steadying my spine. "I'm setting boundaries," I said, "not abandoning anyone." A woman near the front scoffed. "Same thing, child." The word child stung more than it should have. I was 28. I paid my own bills. I worked long hours shaping other people's children. Yet here I was still expected to be obedient, silent, grateful. My brother stepped closer, the edge of his shoe tapping against the leg of my chair. "Why now?" he demanded. "Why pretend your life is suddenly harder than ours?" "I never said that," I whispered. "You didn't have to." His voice sharpened. "You've been acting like we're dragging you down." My mother's head lowered again. "That's how it feels," she murmured. A pulse thudded in my throat, because I knew this wasn't about groceries or phone bills or school fees. This was about control, about the comfort they found in my sacrifice. Mrs. Benton watched me carefully, as if she sensed the shift coming, the tension tightening around the truth that hadn't been spoken yet. And for the first time, I felt something new rising beneath the fear. Not anger, not defiance. Clarity. The kind that arrives only when you're pushed past the point of return. A sharp clap echoed from the far side of the hall, the sound of someone shutting a binder, loud enough to snap every lingering whisper. It jolted through the room, and for a moment, even my breath paused. An older uncle stepped forward, irritation tightening every line on his face. "This conversation is pointless," he said. "She's made up her mind. She doesn't care about family anymore." My stomach twisted. "That's not true." He ignored me. People who walk away always come back when life humbles them. The words landed like a warning, one meant to wound. I took a slow breath. I haven't walked away. I'm asking for balance. My brother let out a low, dry laugh. "Balance? Since when did you become a motivational speaker?" The room tittered. Not loudly, but enough for humiliation to bloom hot along my collarbone. I steadied my voice. "I've been drowning in responsibilities none of you even acknowledge." My aunt folded her arms. "We didn't ask you to drown. You chose it." Mrs. Benton's eyes widened slightly at that, but she stayed silent, letting the moment unfold. I felt the shift then, the subtle, undeniable truth rising through the noise. They weren't upset because I stopped helping. They were upset because they lost control of the version of me they benefited from. My mother whispered, almost too softly, "You've become someone I don't recognize." The words tore through me, quiet but deep, because they weren't true. I was finally becoming someone I could recognize, and they couldn't stand it. A wave of warm air drifted through the hall when someone opened the back door, the sudden heat rolling across my skin like a reminder that I was standing too close to breaking. It made my breathing shallow, my pulse louder in my ears. My brother noticed. "See?" he said quietly, almost smug. "She can't handle any pressure." I straightened my spine. "I've handled pressure my whole life." My aunt clicked her tongue. "Then handle this. Handle your family." Every word felt like a hand pushing against my chest, steady, relentless. "I've been handling everything for years," I said, "alone." A man near the wall muttered, "Then why complain now? Why make it messy?" Because I was tired, but saying that out loud felt too fragile for a room hungry for weakness. My mother lifted her face, her eyes glossy. "You used to bring me envelopes every month. You never questioned it. You never hesitated." "I never hesitated," I echoed. "But I was hurting, and no one saw it." Silence prickled the air. Mrs. Benton stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Maybe she didn't want to disappoint you. Maybe she thought love meant carrying more than her share." My mother's lips tightened, but she didn't look away. The truth pressed against my throat. "I've missed chances. I've drained my savings. I gave up things I never told you about." My brother scoffed. "Excuses." "No," I said, my voice steadying. "Consequences." The room stilled, because they weren't used to my voice sounding firm, only useful. And for the first time, I felt the ground shift beneath the expectations that had held me for so long. A shifting shadow moved across the floor as someone stepped closer to the overhead light, the shape stretching long before shrinking again. That small motion pulled my eyes downward, a reminder of how easily something can be distorted when seen from the wrong angle. My cousin cleared his throat. "You make it sound like you've sacrificed the world," he said, "but you've had it easier than most of us." The shadow moved again, cutting through the space between us, uneven, warped. "How?" I asked softly. He shrugged. "You got a stable job, a respected one. You don't have kids to feed, you live alone. Meanwhile, the rest of us—" Mrs. Benton interrupted, her voice steady. "She lives alone because she can't afford anything bigger, because she sends half her income away." My cousin waved her off. "That's her choice." My chest tightened. Choice. The word felt sharp enough to leave marks. "I didn't choose to be responsible for everyone," I said. "It became expected." My aunt stepped in, raising her chin slightly. "And what's wrong with expectations? That's what families are." "Families share," I replied quietly. "They don't drain one person dry." A few murmurs stirred, some uneasy, some disapproving. My mother's jaw trembled. "You make it sound like we used you." The room went still. Then, without planning it, without rehearsing it, the truth broke free. "You did." A breath rippled through the hall, sharp, collective, undeniable. For the first time, no one spoke. No one moved, because the word they had avoided for years had finally been said out loud, and nothing would be the same after that. My breath caught before I realized I had stopped breathing. It wasn't fear. It was the weight of hearing my own truth spoken aloud, bare, unsoftened, impossible to pull back. The hall felt colder, though no window had opened. Every face seemed sharper, as if honesty had carved new angles into the air. My mother blinked slowly, as though the word had struck her in a place she did not expect. "You think we used you?" she whispered. The trembling in her voice almost pulled me backward, almost, but there was no room left for retreat. My brother stepped forward, disbelief tightening his jaw. "That's a serious accusation." I held his stare. "It's not an accusation. It's my life." A woman near the wall murmured, "Maybe she's exaggerating." But another voice, soft, hesitant, rose from the back. "I saw her buying uniforms for 3 different kids last year," a neighbor said. "None of them were hers." My aunt's face hardened. "That was her responsibility." "No," I replied. "It was something I did because I cared. But caring turned into obligation, and obligation turned into expectation, and expectation turned into entitlement." The hall felt like it shrank with every word. My cousin shook his head. "You're twisting things." "I'm naming things," I said quietly. A silence settled heavy across the room, not the angry silence from earlier. This one was different, warier. The kind that comes when the first crack in a long-held belief finally appears. For the first time, I could see it in their eyes. They weren't just shocked that I spoke. They were shocked that I wouldn't take the words back. And that shift, small but irreversible, moved through the hall like the first break in a dam. A plastic bottle rolled across the floor, nudged by someone's foot, its hollow rattle spinning through the silence like a warning. The tiny sound sharpened the stillness in the hall, drawing every pair of eyes back to me as if the universe itself refused to let the moment soften. My mother pressed her palm flat against the table as if steadying herself. "All these years," she said, voice trembling, "I thought I raised a daughter who understood sacrifice." My chest tightened. "I learned sacrifice from you," I replied. But I also learned silence, and silence nearly broke me. My brother scoffed, but the laugh didn't land. "You think we're the reason your life is hard?" "No," I said. "I think I've been the reason all of yours have been easier." A hush, sharp, immediate. My cousin leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "So now you're the hero of the family?" "I'm the one who filled the gaps no one else wanted to see," I said quietly. A woman near the window whispered, She's not wrong." Her voice trembled, as though saying it might cost her something. My aunt snapped, "Don't start taking her side now." But the room wasn't the same anymore. The certainty of a moment ago had thinned, stretched, frayed at the edges. Mrs. Benton stepped closer to my mother. "Sometimes," she said softly, "children grow tired of carrying what adults refuse to put down." My mother's shoulders slumped, just barely, but enough for me to see the fracture. This wasn't rebellion. This was revelation. And the truth was beginning to rearrange the room, one breath at a time. A thin, shaky breath slipped out from someone behind me. So quiet it might have been accidental, but sharp enough to cut through the thick tension settled across the hall. It felt like the entire room inhaled at once, waiting for whatever came next. My brother seized the pause. "So what now?" he demanded. "You're done helping? You're done being part of this family?" I met his stare without dropping mine. "I'm done being everyone's safety net." Gasps flickered through the crowd, tiny sparks of disbelief. My aunt leaned forward, her voice colder than it had been all afternoon. "And if your mother ends up struggling, if your siblings need help, what then? You'll just watch?" The accusation sliced deep, but the truth rose steadier than I expected. "I'll help with what's essential," I said, "but I won't wreck my life to keep everyone else comfortable." "Comfortable?" my cousin spat. "You think we're comfortable?" Mrs. Benton spoke before I could answer. "She didn't say that," she said gently. "She said she's been giving more than she can sustain." A man by the door shook his head. "She's becoming selfish. That's what this is." I turned toward him. "Selfishness is taking from someone until they break, and calling it duty." The room fell still again. A different kind of still, not united against me anymore, just uncertain, unsettled, shifting. My mother's voice broke through the quiet. "I don't know how to live without what you give." The words hit my chest like a stone dropped from height. Not angry, not cruel, just painfully honest. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't only about money. It was about the version of me they had leaned on for so long. They didn't know who they were without her. My fingers curled inward before I noticed, nails pressing lightly into my palm, a small involuntary grip, as if my own hands were trying to hold me steady while the room shifted again. The air felt thick, almost grainy, like it carried every unspoken fear inside it. My mother's confession still echoed. "I don't know how to live without what you give." I swallowed hard, not because it was cruel, but because it was true in a way I'd never wanted to face. My brother stepped into the silence, voice low but cutting. "See? You built this problem. You encouraged it. Don't act brand new now." My throat tightened. "I encouraged it because I loved you," I said. "But love shouldn't require losing myself." A woman near the middle table whispered, "Families fall apart when one person stops giving." Mrs. Benton turned toward her. "Families fall apart when one person is forced to give everything." The hall hummed with unease. A few faces softened, others hardened like stone. My aunt crossed her arms. "So what do you want? Appreciation? Gratitude?" "I want room to breathe," I said quietly. "I want to save for my future without being made to feel guilty. I want to stop living one crisis away from collapse." My cousin shook his head. "You're dramatic." But behind him, the young woman who had spoken earlier about the school books lifted her chin. "She's not dramatic. She's exhausted." Her voice trembled, but it carried. A small crack opened in the room then, not loud, not obvious, but real. A shift in who believed what. A shift in who could still pretend this was all my fault. And for the first time all day, I felt the beginning of something unexpected, the faintest edge of freedom. A sudden draft slipped in through the crack beneath the door, a thin ribbon of cold air brushing against my ankles. It startled me. Not because of the temperature, but because everything else in the hall had been so heavy, so hot with tension, that the chill felt almost out of place. My mother rubbed her arms as if she felt it too. "We didn't ask you to give up everything," she said softly. "We just needed you." I met her eyes. I needed me too. My brother exhaled sharply, pacing a tight circle. "You're talking like some outsider, like you don't belong here." "I belong," I said, "but belonging shouldn't cost me my stability." My aunt shook her head slowly. "You sound like someone who's already left." The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. In some ways, I had left the moment I realized I deserved a future that wasn't built only on sacrifice. From the back, an older man cleared his throat. "She's not wrong to want her own life," he said. "Children aren't retirement plans." The silence that followed was thick, stunned. My cousin muttered, "Are we really doing this? Turning against family for her?" Mrs. Benton stepped closer, her expression firm. "We are finally telling the truth. All of us." The cold air brushed my ankle again, and for the first time I didn't brace against it. I let it settle. I let it steady me. Because the room wasn't united anymore, not in its blame and not in its expectations. A fracture had opened, and through it something honest was beginning to breathe. The room fell into an unexpected hush, so complete that even the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to fade. It wasn't calm. It was the kind of silence that forms right before something breaks open. A pause, stretched thin with anticipation. My mother clasped her hands together, her fingers twisting as if she were braiding worry into each movement. "All I ever wanted," she whispered, "was for us to stay connected. Not divided like this." I stepped closer, carefully, as if approaching something fragile. "We can stay connected," I said, "but not if I'm collapsing under the weight of everyone's needs." My brother rubbed his forehead, frustration tightening his shoulders. "You make it sound like we're parasites." "I didn't say that." But the truth flickered between us anyway, unspoken, undeniable. A young girl near the door, maybe 14, stared at me with wide eyes. "My mom said you always helped us," she murmured. "I thought that meant you were strong." I knelt slightly so we were eye level. "Being strong doesn't mean never resting," I said softly. "It means knowing when you need help, too." Her gaze wavered, confusion giving way to something more tender. My aunt scoffed from across the room. "Listen to her. Teaching children lessons she refuses to learn herself." But her words didn't land the way they used to, not with the room shifting, not with people starting to see me clearly for the first time. Mrs. Benton rested a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You're not choosing yourself over them," she said. "You're choosing survival. There's a difference." The silence deepened, not harsh, not accusing, just different, like the room was finally preparing to hear what came next, and I felt it rising, steady and unstoppable, the moment I would no longer apologize for wanting a life of my own. A pair of eyes shifted toward me from the back row, slow, uncertain, almost questioning. It was the first time all afternoon someone looked at me without expectation or accusation. That quiet glance, small as it was, felt like a crack of light slipping into a long, closed room. My mother noticed it too. She blinked, as if realizing for the first time that the narrative she held onto so tightly was no longer the only one in the air. She lowered her hands. "You really think you've been carrying us?" she asked, not angrily this time, but with a kind of trembling vulnerability I hadn't seen since childhood. I stepped closer. "I know I have, and I know you didn't mean to let it get this far, but it did." My brother looked away, jaw tightening, not in defiance, but in something closer to discomfort, maybe even recognition. "I thought you were fine," he muttered. "You never said anything." "I didn't know how," I replied. "Every time I tried, it felt like I was betraying everyone." The room softened, not dramatically, not completely, but enough for the edges of hostility to recede. Mrs. Benton nodded slowly. "Silence is heavy until it breaks," she said, "and she's been quiet for a long time." My mother's eyes glistened. "What happens now?" she whispered. I exhaled. A steadying breath that felt like the first true inhale of my own life. "Now," I said gently, "we start learning what support should actually look like. Not just for you, for me too." For a moment, no one spoke. Not out of anger, out of possibility. The room didn't feel like a battlefield anymore, just a place where the truth had finally been allowed to breathe. A soft rattle trembled through the hall door as the wind pressed against it, the metal frame giving a quiet, steady vibration. It wasn't loud, but it carried, like a reminder that the world outside kept moving, even while we stood suspended in this fragile moment. My mother wiped beneath her eyes, her fingers slow, almost hesitant. "I never wanted to be a burden," she whispered. The honesty in her voice felt raw, almost delicate. "You're not a burden," I said. But the expectations were. My cousin shifted in his seat, discomfort replacing the earlier arrogance. "So what? We just stop asking you for help?" "You can ask," I said. "You just can't demand." My brother let out a long breath, shoulders dropping a fraction. "I didn't realize how much you did," he admitted quietly. "None of us did." "That's the problem," I replied, softer now. "No one saw it because I kept pretending I was fine." Mrs. Benton gave a small, approving nod. "Strength that hides itself eventually collapses," she said. My mother looked at me, her expression no longer hard, just tired. "Will you still be there? For the important things?" "Yes," I said, "but I won't lose myself again to prove it." A murmur of agreement passed through a few people, not loud, not unified, but real. The tone of the hall had changed entirely, less judgment, more reflection. For the first time, I felt my shoulders loosen, not in triumph, in release. The kind that comes when you stop being pulled in every direction and finally stand where your own life begins. The overhead light shifted subtly as a cloud drifted past the sun outside, casting a gentler, warmer glow across the hall. The harsh edges of every face softened for a moment, as if the room itself had taken a breath with us. My aunt, who had been the sharpest voice all afternoon, finally lowered her gaze. "I didn't realize how much pressure we put on you," she said quietly, almost as if the words surprised her on their way out. I nodded once. "I know you didn't mean harm, but intention doesn't erase the impact." My cousin rubbed the back of his neck. No mockery left in his expression. "We've been leaning on you because you always showed up," he admitted. "Maybe too much." Mrs. Benton stepped beside me, her presence steady and grounding. "Help should flow both ways," she said gently, "not only in one direction." My mother looked at me with a trembling breath. "I didn't know you were hurting," she whispered. "You never said." "I tried," I replied softly. "But every time I did, someone reminded me of what I owed. So eventually, I stopped trying." A long silence followed, different from all the ones before it. Not accusatory, not tense, just reflective. My brother shifted closer, his voice subdued. "So how do we fix this?" I inhaled slowly, letting the question settle deep in my chest. "We start by understanding that I'm a person," I said. "Not a resource, not a solution. A person." The light above brightened again, the cloud passing, revealing a clearer glow. For the first time, I believed they could see me, really see me. Not who I had been required to be, but who I actually was. My hand loosened at my side, fingers slowly uncurling as if letting go of something I had carried for far too long. The simple motion felt heavier than any argument spoken in the last hour, a quiet release that settled through my shoulders with unexpected warmth. My mother watched it, not with judgment, with understanding. She stepped closer, hesitant but sincere. "I don't want to lose you," she murmured. "You won't," I said, "but you can't keep losing me to everyone else." Her breath shook, but she nodded. Small, vulnerable, real. My brother rubbed his thumb across his palm, restless. "We'll try," he said quietly. "I can't promise we'll be perfect, but we'll try." My cousin looked away, embarrassed, the arrogance stripped from him. "We'll figure out the wedding without your help," he said. It's fine." My aunt exhaled slowly, almost reluctantly. "You should have said something years ago," she whispered. "I didn't know how," I replied. Mrs. Benton touched my arm gently. "You spoke today," she said, "and they heard you." For the first time, the room didn't feel like a weight pressing against my lungs. It felt open, unsteady, but open. I took a breath that settled deep, anchoring me in a way I had needed for years. And as the last of the tension drifted from my chest, one simple truth rested quietly inside me. I was finally choosing a life that included me. A soft stillness followed, and I let it stay.